Time for our Fiscal Focus segment, as always brought to you by InfoChoice, your choice of information on Australian consumer finance. Now, this week we're focusing on financial dreams, as new research from MLC reveals more than half of Australians regularly think about their financial dreams, but only 1 in 3 are taking the steps to make those dreams a reality. Joining us to discuss is Jenneke Mills, who's the Head of Technical Services at MLC. G'day, Jenneke. Welcome to the Savings Tip Jar.
Thanks, Dom. Thanks for having me. Hey, Harrison, how you going?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Jenneke. I hope you're well. I know it's
Great.
late in the day, but thanks for slotting in some time to talk to us two bozos. But the first question I wanted to ask for you is just kind of what Dom was saying there, was around the kind of mental block of pursuing those dreams. So can you explain a bit of that, like a bit of that mental block and why people really aren't pursuing them at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So the report was quite interesting. So we've got some insights around kind of what people are thinking about their future. And we know that people across all age groups are really thinking about their dreams, their financial dreams, and planning for the future. But there's a little bit of a gap when it comes to kind of the aspiration achievement side of things, and
Mm,
people aren't taking steps. And the report gave us some great insights around why that's potentially the case, but also how people are feeling, more importantly, about their money. And there were some quite concerning statistics to come out of that. So, I mean, you can look at the fact, and then I can give you my 2 cents if you're happy to run it that way. If you have a look at kind of what the report told us, people are feeling like they need a little bit more financial literacy. They're
mm,
not quite sure where to go for information and correct information. They're dealing with financial constraints around cost of living pressures, potentially not feeling like their income's enough to help them get on their way, and they're not feeling equipped to answer financial questions. So that's the insights from the report. Now, to give you a little bit of background into my life, I've been a financial planner, a family financial advisor, fortunately or unfortunately, and so I've got a little bit of kind of experience knowledge working with siblings and other relatives. And kind of the common themes for me are that people from all walks of life are feeling like they don't have enough time, they don't have enough knowledge, and they don't know who to talk to. And so when I say kind of they don't have enough knowledge, to me, that's really interesting because we're living in the age of information where
mm,
we can literally Google anything and we've got all the answers there at our fingertips. Yet we seem to kind of have this information paralysis where whatever it is we're Googling, there's so much information out there. I think the next step of really trying to understand what that means and break it down and then apply it to your own circumstances can be really overwhelming. Some people just don't care for it. They're not necessarily kind of interested naturally in finance. And then there's the time aspect. So even for me, I've mentioned that I've been a financial planner in the past. Well, I don't even want to start to tell you about some of the things on my to-do list because you just kind of I'd lose all credibility and you'd be like, why is this woman in finance? She can't even get her own stuff together. But that's just the truth, right? We all have really busy lives. When we come home at night, we start to really break it down and we think about what it is we want to achieve and kind of what we need to do to get there. It's kind of like there's always something else that pops up as being more important. So look, hopefully you feel like some of that applies to you, and it's not just me saying my to-do list is as long as my arm.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's just easier to put on Netflix overnight rather than actually write down what your goals are. I'm sure you're the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And then like, after we've recorded the session, maybe you can share some Netflix tips with me because I'm just about out.
run out of shows to watch. Yeah, no, I can totally relate to a lot of what you're saying, but also the results of the survey where we all want for things. We all want a lot more out of our lives. And even when we achieve our dreams, we suddenly like, oh, well, I want this now. But I guess in this age of kind of instant gratification that we can get with everything at our fingertips, get all the answers. Perhaps we want things somewhat, handed on a silver platter. We don't want to have to do the hard work. But I'm a millennial. Maybe that's just millennial talk. Were there any differences there between the generations? Did age seem to impact the results?
Yeah, it did a little bit. And it's actually a really interesting point that you just mentioned about kind of that instant gratification. I think that might go some way to explaining some of those generational differences. And I wouldn't have picked you for a millennial. I thought you were younger than me, but we are
Okay.
in the same generation.
Appreciate that. Thank
Um,
you.
so I mean, kind of blanket when we look at the common trends across the reports, as you'd imagine, there's some themes that are kind of common to all ages. So when it comes to things like wanting to achieve financial independence, balance, financial security, they were all really common themes across all age groups. In fact, I think financial independence topped the report 2 years running. But when we kind of start to break it down and go, well, what are some of the differences? Some things you'd probably expect, right? So work-life balance and the importance of that kind of decreases as people age, obviously, because they're transitioning into retirement. Whereas, prioritizing things like regular holidays increases, probably unsurprisingly, as we get older.
Mm.
But then there's some other really key differences, and this is where I think it's really important, and it's great that we're having a conversation and we're starting to try and help people on the journey. Because when you look at cost of living pressures, Gen X are kind of feeling that pressure the most. So Gen
Mm.
X, just for anyone who's listening, they're kind of people born between 65 and 1980. So either between 44 and 59 this year. So they're a little bit older than us. And they're kind of that sandwich generation. Have you heard that term thrown
Mm.
around? Yeah. And so they're kind of sandwiched between having potentially aging parents that they're trying to look after, as well as having adult children who are
But they're
also in a
somewhat
bit of,
caught in the crossfire, right? In the whole generational
yeah.
wars. It's always Boomer v Millennials, and then
Yeah.
everyone forgets about Gen
Yeah.
X in
Gen
the
X are
middle.
quite forgotten about.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And then, you've got the boomers and the silent generation who are even older saying, you guys don't know how easy you have it today. And, I have that conversation with my grandfather regularly and I say, yeah, but we're also living in this age of overwhelm. And, to your other point that you raised and my next point around the differences in the generations, we've got Gen Z, or I was going to say Gen Z, but Gen Z. So there are people who are currently aged 12 to 27. And they're actually, believe it or not, the generation who have the most anxiety around money. So 41% of this group said that concerns about money are on their mind all the time or often.
Mm.
And so I sat back and I went, wow, this is the generation who you'd kind of say, generally speaking, probably have the least financial responsibility at the moment. Why is it that they're feeling this pressure? And then I kind of stopped and thought about it. And, to your point before, Dom, this instant gratification, where is it that they're learning and creating their baseline expectations for themselves and what life should be like and what they should be doing? And then, back to that click of a button kind of thing we talked about earlier. There are they setting, I shouldn't say they are, because I mean I don't know, I'm only assuming, but is the access to information that they've got and being able to go on social media and look at influencers and looking at people literally on the other side of the world to create their own benchmark, is that actually creating some kind of anxiety where they feel like, I don't know, they have to be out there achieving these same things?
For
I don't
sure.
know
And if
what.
you had to guess, Jenica, what generation do you think I'd be part of?
Oh God, that's a loaded question. I asked someone this the other day and I got myself
Princess
into all
territory.
kinds of trouble. Well, I mean, you look like you're Gen Z, but you have the intelligence and you carry yourself like someone in Gen X. Is that the right answer?
Very well answered. You've done your PR training, I'm sure. Both Dom and I are good moisturizer aficionados. That's probably why we look a bit younger than we are. But yes, I'm part of the millennial generation just. So yeah, well, and talking about millennials and maybe Gen Z as well, obviously one of the biggest goals that we're pursuing at the moment is buying a home. It seems like it's everywhere we go. We're bombarded with, home buying aspirations on the news and how it's so hard, blah, blah, blah. Me personally, and kind of what you were saying about that over analysis and that information overload, I'm in the pursuit of buying a home as well. And I've kind of kept a big chunk of money in this bank account just sitting there for years and years waiting for the so-called right time to pull the trigger, but the truth is, like, there really is no right time. And if I bought 5 years ago, I'd be a lot better off now than I am right now, and I'm still in the same sort of place as I was 5 years ago. So I guess what I want to ask Jenica is how are sort of particularly younger people getting around this cost of living crunch and pursuing those home buying goals?
Yeah, and that's an interesting one because, I would have thought instinctively that cost of living would have been right up there as one of the number one concerns. And it actually was the number one concern. But the number of people who said it was a concern has actually dropped 10% since 2023.
Hmm.
And for Gen Z, it's actually completely dropped out of their top three. It was last year their number one aspiration, and
Wow.
it's now dropped right down the charts. And I kind of wonder, is it the economic environment that people have kind of lost their confidence or lost their aspiration, no longer think it's a reality? Because I mean, interest rates have stabilized, right? From this time last year, we have a little
Mm.
bit more certainty there. But, we know that costs are increasing, and maybe it is just that they've kind of reevaluated what is important to them. But certainly it is a really big area we're seeing, and something else to come out of the report was how many people are actually receiving financial support from their parents.
Mm.
So I think saying in that Gen Z category, 85% of Gen Z actually said they're receiving some kind of financial support from their parents or grandparents. And I mean, for anyone in that category who's listening, potentially even parents who are looking to provide support to children, often it's full of emotion, right? Parents want
Mm.
to do the right thing by their kids. They want to help them if they can. And so then it's a real conversation about, well, before you pull the trigger and you actually give over a lump sum, is there a right way to do it? So if we're saving for a house, but say that, you've also got student debt, you've got HEX debt or help debt as they call it now.
Mm.
Are you better off giving your kids some cash to get rid of that help debt, or are you better off actually giving them the money to put a deposit on a home? And you might kind of go, well, what's the difference? Well, the difference could be, for example, that student debt is considered debt when working out what that person's borrowing capacity is. So can they actually borrow what they want to with that student debt? And then on the flip side, if you give them that money to pay off the student debt and you actually could have given them that money as a home loan deposit, are they going to be up for lender's mortgage insurance if they haven't got quite enough saved? So,
Mm.
what was kind of, at the outset for many people, this, goodwill gesture to give cash, there are so many, and we've only just talked about, buying a new home, but there's so many considerations off the back of that we're seeing.
Yeah, this has become a real emerging trend recently. This whole, the younger generations becoming maybe a little bit more dependent on the wealthier older generations. I mean, we talk so much about the rise of the bank of mum and dad, so it really does seem like people are becoming more reliant on family support to make their financial dreams a reality. But I mean, what are some of the other sort of major barriers that you guys are seeing to people achieving their financial dreams?
Yeah, so a lot of people reported obviously cost of living pressure, but off the back of that, they don't feel that their income is sufficient to actually help them achieve their dreams. That lack of access to information, some people said they think a financial planner can help, but they're not quite sure how to go about it, or they think it's going to be too expensive. And then interest rates was the other big one for many people.
For sure. It certainly sounds like a bit of information overload. I'm about to fire up Netflix to take the edge off. Jenneke Mills, thanks so much for joining us on the Savings Tip Jar podcast.
No worries. Thanks for having me.